right here on Channel Africa. Available on the Channel Africa app. Africa World Hour. Africa World Hour. Unpacking global headlines from an African perspective.
Good evening and welcome to Africa World Hour. It's just gone 9 o'clock Central African time. This is Channel Africa, the African perspective, broadcasting live from Johannesburg in South Africa. Catch us live on SABC Plus app, DSTV, ODBK channel 802 and on OpenView channel 628. I'm Thabiso Lehoko and I'm standing in for Tsepiso Makwetla, who's currently out. You can actual fact follow us on social media for updates, highlights, and exclusive content. On X, it's at Channel Africa 1, Facebook, Channel Africa, Instagram at Channel Africa 1, on TikTok, it's at Channel Africa 1, and on YouTube, it's at Channel Africa 1. You can give us a call on +27 714 4459. And if you have any news that you'd like to share with us, be it news, business, sport, it's newsroom at channelafrica.co.za.
The pulse of the continent in 60 minutes. Stay informed and inspired with Africa World Hour on Channel Africa.
The Women for Change organization that is behind the Silent Nation shutdown in South Africa say they were overwhelmed after hearing that President Cyril Ramaphosa has declared gender-based violence, GBV, a national disaster. The organization's sentiments comes amid thousands of social activists partaking in various demonstrations across the country to declare GBV a national disaster. The organization's Michael Masina says this is the outcome that they had been fighting for the longest time.
Next week, Friday, the 28th, we have a follow-up meeting. That is when the detailed plan will be highlighted to us as to what are the next steps, how the classification is going to be implemented, as well as the role in which civil society and NGOs will also play in terms of making sure that we can start making tangible and meaningful change for all the survivors, as well as making sure that the legislation that we have currently gets to be enforced in a manner and in a better way.
A diplomatic row between South Africa and the United States has intensified ahead of this weekend's G20 Leaders Summit in Johannesburg. President Cyril Ramaphosa has signalled that Pretoria will now conduct a planned formal handover of the G20 chairmanship to US diplomats at the end of the summit. The US will host next year's gathering. The BBC's Mayeni Jones reports.
The US used to be one of South Africa's main Western partners, but over the last year they've really fallen out. And that's because President Donald Trump has repeated widely discredited claims that there is a genocide of South Africa's white minority. He's offered them asylum. They're the only minority group who is entitled to asylum currently in the US. And he's also expelled South Africa's ambassador. He's cut aid. He's imposed tariffs. South Africa, in response, has tried to remain diplomatic, but the recent events suggest that this relationship is not getting much better.
International relations analyst Oscar van Heerden has described the arrival of some of the world leaders in South Africa as a significant moment for Africa. This year's G20 summit is being held for the first time in an African nation. It will focus on helping developing economies adapt to the climate crisis, transition to clean energy, and cut excessive debt. Van Heerden says that there is likely to be a declaration at the end of the summit.
They know that the Group of 20 is about the 20 largest economies in the world, but they are keen and they are sensitive enough to know that they cannot operate in a world without Africa, without the third world, and certainly without the global south. And I think because everyone has been on the receiving end of the bully called Trump, that they are going to rally behind South Africa. Not that they are anti-Trump or anti the US, but they are saying that we are no longer going to be bullied, and we need to recognize that issues of sustainability, equality are actually important in the multilateral global system.
The Emir of Qatar, Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, has just concluded a 2-day official visit to Rwanda, a trip that underscores deepening ties between Doha and Kigali. The visit comes at a pivotal moment, reflecting not only growing economic cooperation, but also a shared vision of peace, stability, and sustainable development in the region. It also comes at a time when the region is grappling with ongoing crisis in the eastern part of the DRC, to which Qatar has been playing a central role in mediating the warring parties. Analyst James Munyaneza speaks on the significance of the visit.
This visit carries a great deal of political, economic, and diplomatic weight, and this also marks a milestone in the growing partnership between Kigali and Doha. It is a very meaningful visit. Like for their side, they named it friendly visit. This is a very timely visit, as Qatar is a key mediator in the security issue between the M23 and the DRC government.
And finally, the European Union's top diplomat has said the EU will support any plan that brings a just and lasting peace to Ukraine, after President Volodymyr Zelensky received a draft proposal for the US. Kaja Kallas reiterated that any such plan would need to have Kyiv and its European allies on board. Details of the American proposals have not been confirmed officially, but media reports indicate it's heavily based on Moscow's demands. The BBC's Jonathan Beale is in Kyiv.
What we've seen so far, and again I repeat, this is a draft document, but what we've seen so far, it does reflect a lot of the demands that Russia has been making of Ukraine, such as cutting the size of its armed forces, also giving up parts of the Donbass, and there are concerns that it favours one side over the other. Now that said, Washington has said that both sides will have to make difficult concessions.
The pulse of the continent in 60 minutes. Stay informed and inspired with Africa World Hour on Channel Africa.
Now, women who took up the call by a non-governmental organization, Women for Change, to take part in the G20 Women's Shutdown believe they've delivered a clear message to the South African government and the G20 leaders that women in South Africa have had enough of gender-based violence and femicide. Women for Change had called for, amongst others, for women to dress in black to mourn and honor the 15 women killed every day in South Africa on Friday. At Constitution Hill in Johannesburg, scores of women laid still for 15 minutes while the names of the victims of GBV were being called. Sisi Sekgalo was at Constitution Hill and has more on the story.
They came in numbers and heeded the call, which was made by a non-governmental organization, Women for Change, to stay away from all paid and unpaid work in their workplaces, homes, and even universities. The movement is demanding that gender-based violence and femicide be declared a national disaster. At 12 noon, women and members of the LGBTIQ+ community, dressed in black, spread across the concrete floor of the historic Constitution Hill in Johannesburg and laid still for 15 minutes. Women for Change hailed their call as a success and believe their message has reached the government and the G20 leaders who will be meeting from Saturday. The spokesperson for Women for Change is Cameron Kasambala.
This day was important. This day was to memorialize and recognize the victims that were lost due to the negligence of our government. And so this moment is important, and we're so grateful to have had the support and the turn up that we had. We're so grateful to have seen so many women, members of the queer community, and men coming forward to support this very important day.
Claudia Lopez from Hendrik Bull Foundation was also part of the G20 Women's Shutdown at Constitution Hill. She explains why her organization was part of the protest.
It reminds me of 2018 when we had the first total shutdown, and by then government started listening. So we had the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence. To do this again a couple of years later is really sad that we have to come together again. But I'm really glad that we have a movement of people, women and men, saying we've had enough of violence against women, of gender-based violence against kids, everybody else like that.
Political parties and individual women also heeded the call.
My name is Rufilo Zulu, and I came here from work with my colleagues. We work in the railway industry, very male-dominant environment, and we are here to stand with the women who are today marching against GBV and femicide. We are women that are tired, that are exhausted, that live in fear of the many cases that are reported on a daily basis. We are exhausted, we are tired, and we are saying enough is enough on this particular day.
My name is Karabu Mamabolo, and I'm currently representing Unite for Change. It's important for us to be here to stand against GBV. Say enough is enough. Make the rapers know that we are here and we are changing. We have heard enough. Every day, 24 hours, there's a case of a woman who's being raped, killed, gunned down by a brother, a father, and uncle. We are no more safe.
For Channel Africa, I'm Sisi Sekhalo in Johannesburg, South Africa.
South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa is tonight hosting a high-level reception dinner for African heads of state and government attending the G20 Leaders Summit in Johannesburg. The gathering forms a part of South Africa's inaugural G20 presidency, an opportunity Pretoria has said will be used to firmly place Africa's priorities at the centre of global economic decision-making. Under Ramaphosa's leadership, South Africa is pushing to deepen partnerships with African economies by strengthening the G20 Compact with Africa, a framework designed to boost private investment, infrastructure development and economic reform across the continent. Let's now talk to Channel Africa's reporter, Michael Mbewe, who attended the dinner. A very good evening, Michael. I won't ask you about the dinner you had, but one thing I know is that you were inside the venue today. Can you paint us a picture of the atmosphere at the reception dinner hosted by President Ramaphosa? Who was in the room, Michael, and what stood out?
Good evening, Thabiso, but also good evening to our listeners across the continent of Africa, but also across the globe because of this, gigantic summit that South Africa, but also along with other African countries, is hosting. The atmosphere was a blend of ceremony, confidence, and continental pride, and a sense of historic significance because this is the first G20 Leaders Summit ever hosted on African soil. In the room, you had a strong showing of African heads of state and government, senior ministers, AU officials, and several leaders from the Caribbean, whom Ramaphosa repeatedly referred to as the sixth region of Africa. What stood out most was the mood of unity, leaders mingling, exchanging notes, and genuinely appearing committed to presenting a consolidated African front ahead tomorrow's negotiations. I noticed AU Commission Chair Mahamudu Ali Yusuf, the President of Djibouti, Namibian President Netumbo Nandi Ndaitwah, but also Equatorial Guinea's Teodoro Obiang Nguema Mbasongo, but also other African leaders, Thabiso.
What were the main themes or messages President Ramaphosa emphasized during the reception, especially regarding Africa's role within the G20 system?
Yes, Thabiso, as you know, the theme for this G20 summit for South Africa is solidarity, equality, but also sustainability. So South Africa's call, together with the South-to-South cooperation and partners, are saying this is now the time to rise. But what did Ramaphosa emphasize? The core message was that Africa is a continent on the rise, a phrase Ramaphosa used, and then he highlighted that the significance of the African Union recent admission as a full G20 member, Africa's aspiration to be a strong, united, and influential global player, the need for deeper economic cooperation, more intra-African investment and trade expansion, a strong defense of multilateralism, fair trade and reformed global governance, and crucially, positioning Africa as a vital partner in advancing equitable global development Thabiso.
Michael, how did the African heads of state and government respond to South Africa's push to strengthen the G20 compact with Africa? Were there any notable reactions, commitments, or concerns?
So from what I observed at Thabiso, the response was very positive. Many leaders nodded or engaged closely as Ramaphosa spoke about debt sustainability, critical minerals, and just energy transitions. There were I didn't see any objections, and there was nobody else who spoke after that. But now, let me also outline that South Africa's, 4 flagship priorities are to strengthen disaster resilience, which is here the push for financial tools to help vulnerable countries rebuild after climate catastrophes. But also number 2 is debt sustainability, to tackle the crippling debt burdens that restrict growth in low-income nations, but also to mobilize finance for a just energy transition. And the 4th one is to harness Africa's critical minerals. As we saw yesterday, Thabiso, South Africa and the EU partnering in signing a landmark deal of critical minerals, and the EU emphasizing the need for, indeed, value adding to those critical minerals after extracting from, the African soil. So yeah, it looks good, Thabiso. So this was more like to Ramaphosa to set the scene with the AU. Remember, this G20 is not only for South Africa, but South Africa is also calling on other African countries to rally behind South Africa to bring the African agenda on the table. More importantly, the other issue in the United Nations, Thabiso, where the South is calling for, the global South is calling for a reform where Africa is also pushing for a permanent seat on the United Nations Security Council, Thabiso.
Very good. Did you observe any significant bilateral engagements or exchanges between the leaders on the sidelines of the dinner?
Unfortunately, Thabiso, after the president spoke and with the media, because of the high level, the stature of the meeting, we were only allowed to listen to the president's remarks. But also I had to rush quickly so that I can come and update Africa but also the globe on what Ramaphosa spoke. So I had to leave the venue to come and really represent our station, Channel Africa, which is part of the, hosting broadcaster or official broadcaster of this first African G20 summit happening here in South Africa, Thabiso.
From what you gathered, how is South Africa positioning its G20 presidency to elevate African priorities with the specific policy areas highlighted?
Indeed. Good question, Thabiso. South Africa is framing its presidency around advancing Agenda 2063 and pushing for Africa-focused outcomes in the G20. Key areas highlighted includes, like I said, debt sustainability, backed by the new Africa expert panel, just energy transition and climate resilience, trade expansion, especially under the African Continental Free Trade Area, critical minerals and ensuring Africa benefits from value chains, humanitarian assistance, and inclusive global governance. So these are the top-notch agenda on the table from tomorrow and this coming Sunday, Thabiso.
Help us to break down how the strengthened compact with Africa was discussed. Are African economies optimistic about what this renewed push might deliver?
Well, we saw the outlook coming out of, the S&P, rate, but also a good budget tabled by South Africa's finance minister, Enoch Godongwana, which gave good, economic sentiments to those, potential investors to the country. And then really at the time where we are hosting this G20, there are good economic outlooks. We have also heard around when we've been moving around that our malls are full. Sandton City, the Johannesburg is, the hotels are doing very good, which is good for our economy, but also the positioning of our country in terms of its reputation after, the back and forth, battering that we are having with the US. But going back to what you have just, asked, Ramaphosa framed the compact with Africa as central to boosting private investment, infrastructure development, and productive economic reforms. He signaled strong optimism by noting that South African companies themselves are planning to substantially increase investments across the continent. From the leaders' reactions, you could see the heads, and the faces nodding, understanding that the implementation of financing are where the real test will lie, Thabiso.
Michael, thanks very much for your time this evening. Let me give you the much needed rest, seeing that you're going to be having a busy G20 weekend.
Yes, absolutely. So tomorrow we are at the peak or the center of where now this thing will be happening at Nazareth, and join us. Will be broadcasting live from Nazareth Expo Center, Channel Africa, all languages. Thabiso, thank you so much for your time.
Very well, Michael. That was a Channel Africa reporter, Michael Mbewe, talking to us on the line of the presidential reception dinner at the G20.
Conversations are happening, and Channel Africa is at the heart of them. We tell the African story with clarity, pride, and purpose, reaching audiences that matter to your brand. Partner with us and connect your business with listeners across borders in multiple languages and markets. For partnership opportunities, sponsorship, or sales, email us at partnership@channelafrica.co.za. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Africa World Hour, unpacking global headlines from an African perspective.
The summit, known as the We 99 People Summit, is underway at the historic Constitution Hill in Johannesburg, South Africa. The participants say it is a counter-summit to the G20 summit, which is taking place this weekend at Nazareth. They say We the 99 People Summit unites movements, artists and communities from across Africa and the world to reimagine a global economy built for the many, not the few. Sisi Sikhalo attended the first day of the summit and has more on the story.
While the other part of Johannesburg is busy, civil society movements, the working class and many others who say they represent 99% of the people have converged at the Constitution Hill for the We the 99 People Summit. The summit is spread across 3 days where various activities will be taking place, including the Uprising Festival on Saturday. Who is from Kenya and is part of the summit. She says the crisis of gender-based violence in South Africa is also present in Kenya. Jehu is adamant that the G20 summit is not about people like her, that it is about the rich 1% population. She expressed that she represents people who fight, people who work all their lives, and people who suffer the indignity in a system that supports only the 1% of the population. Jehu says the 99% are under attack and that uniting is the only way to fight the system.
In Kenya right now, we have a law that is set to criminalize seed sharing. They want to introduce GMOs. I care about food sovereignty. I care about seed sovereignty. The practice where my mother farmed, saved the best seed for planting the next season is an important one. It's an age-old tradition of farming. And now they want to say that in Kenya, people can only buy seeds from the multinationals. And if you share seeds, you will be fined and imprisoned. In Kenya, we have children who are going to bed hungry, children who are going to schools that are broken down, that are not fit for even not just being schools. They are not just fit. They are not even fit infrastructure. The kind of education that children are getting, the kind of poor services that people across Kenya are getting when they go to hospitals, those are the things that I care about. The fact that women are being killed in many numbers. Sexual and gender-based violence is a pandemic in Kenya. Women are being killed, women are being hurt, and the system, the legal system, the government is not doing enough to protect women.
Martha Tukahirwa is from Uganda and shares that she represents all the diverse movements of activists that are doing the frontline work of defending democracy and economic justice, hence her presence at the We the 99 People's Summit.
This moment that we are, celebrating here as with the 99 is a counter to the G20 summit, because we can't have the 1% who are the elite, those who have access to power, that have access to money, making the decisions for an economy that serves the 99%. And right now, the state of the economy across the world is dismal. We are seeing people, dying of poverty, lack of healthcare services, lack of education, no infrastructure. Many people are out of jobs, that the rate of unemployment is so high, and really we are in a state of crisis. It's a crisis of inequality. So at this moment, we are claiming our space and saying that whilst the G20 leaders are having discussions at Nasrec, we are here in a very historical place, Constitutional Hill, which speaks to the fight and the struggles of South African people, but also saying that we are here as a global South in solidarity with you, but also saying let us take up this space and reclaim the power that we are meant to have.
From Mexico, the country is represented in the summit by 9 activists, and Aline Sunsunegi is one of them.
We in Mexico have this Fight Inequality Alliance. We have 96 members in the alliance there, organizations, activists, or collective people. So we are here representing members, that alliance there, and we are here because we need to have this collective power together. And I think most of the people who are here, we are from the Global South. And we as Global South, we've been oppressed by the patriarchy, capitalism, and colonialism. And we know that to fight against this big structure, big system of operations, we need to be together. We are here also because here is the G20, and they are taking all the decisions from all of us, and they are just the 1%, the elite.
The participants are hoping that the summit will draw thousands as it progresses. For Channel Africa, I'm Sisi Sekhalo in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Authorities in central Nigeria are searching for students abducted overnight from a Catholic school in the country's latest mass kidnapping. It comes as the United States weighs possible sanctions and deeper Pentagon involvement to pressure Abuja to better protect its Christian communities. And in the southeast, tensions are rising after separatist leader Nnamdi Kanu was sentenced to life in prison on terrorism charges, a verdict his supporters reject. The government insists that the security crisis is complex and rooted in multiple conflicts across the country. Rights groups, however, warn that without urgent reforms, Nigeria's instability could deepen further. We talked to defense and counter-terrorism expert on Africa, David Otto, who is also the director for the Geneva Center for Africa Security and Strategic Studies. Good evening, David. Trust you well.
Good evening, Thabiso. Thank you very much for having me.
Mass abductions from across schools have become a recurring feature of Nigeria's insecurity. From a vantage point, how do these latest kidnappings fit into the broader evolution of violence in Nigeria over the last 5 to 10 years or so?
Yes, I think, Thabiso, you're referring perhaps to the infamous kidnappings which began sometime in 2014, when you had 200 plus. And, it's very sad to use the word plus because sometimes you don't even know the number of, victims of these kidnappings, which is, another dimension of the level of insecurity. And today, as you rightly said, we have another kidnapping in Kontagora, which is in Niger State, which is almost in the central part of Nigeria. And this is following a recent other kidnap in a school. And this demonstrates, besides, the kidnapping itself, this is a clear demonstration that the government, has lost its protection strategy. It's lost the basic social contract, which is to provide security to its citizens, and we see that not just with soft targets, with schools. Recently, a brigadier general, a commander of the Nigerian military, was abducted by a group that is linked to the so-called Islamic State of West Africa province, or Boko Haram, and executed on a video, which again demonstrates the level that these abductions, the level of insecurity within the country, to a level where it's a breakdown of the social contract. You can see that the government is struggling over some kind of legitimacy. It has been held hostage by non-state groups. It's under attack. No one is spared, from peoples, students to military personnel to government officials, and for the first time, we've seen a scenario where it has now moved ranks, even within the military, to a brigadier general. And again, it just demonstrates the level of insecurity that is ongoing in the country, not just in the northwestern part of the country where you have the Islamic jihadist groups linked to both Al-Qaeda and ISIS. You've got also in the northeast part of the country with a high level of insecurity by so-called bandits. And then, of course, you've got this crisis, which, you mentioned in your intro, where separatist movement, being linked to leaders who are actually being jailed now, the likes of Nnamdi Kanu, that is also ongoing in the country. It's a very deep crisis, of insecurity. And it does demonstrate that there is a need for the government to review its strategy. But I think it's very important, to mention that this cuts across political parties. So we're not just talking about the current party which is in power, the APC, but also during the time of the PDP under President Jonathan, the level of insecurity was high. During the period of President Muhammadu Buhari, there was a high level of insecurity, and now we see the same thing. So it's not just about leaders, it's not just about service chiefs, because the government has just recently changed service chiefs, and this is still happening. So it's a very serious implication to national security across Nigeria.
You speaking about a trend. This is something that had been going on, and here we now have superpowers like the US, who are reportedly weighing sanctions as a measure to counter this, and a deeper Pentagon cooperation to pressure Abuja. Practically speaking, what tools could the US deploy that would materially affect Nigeria's counterterrorism capabilities or political choices at this moment?
I think you've got to look at this from several angles, Thabiso. I think one is the fact that the US is using the Christian dimension to say that a lot of the people that have been killed have been targeted as Christians, perhaps, aligning this with the word genocide. But of course, when you see what is going on across the globe, the case of Israel and Palestine, we've seen, not so much being said on that aspect, from the US side. But from the Nigerian side, you can see that the US is using this to perhaps, pressure the government to take some kind of action. But the other side, the Nigerians are saying that this is the United States, intervening in its, sovereignty. But what we've seen, is that the Nigerian authorities have reacted. They've had a change in military personnel, especially the service chiefs. Now, whether this is linked to the fact that the US has now placed Nigeria as a country of particular concern, we are not sure. But there is a possibility that it could be one of the reasons why there has been a change of service personnel, to say that we've changed personnel, maybe they can do better. But as I mentioned earlier on, the issue is not just changing service chiefs. It has been demonstrated that across the period since more than 2 decades now, we're having this insurgency crisis. So it's not just a matter of changing service chiefs. I think it's a matter of strategy. But from the US perspective, labeling Nigeria as a country of particular concern, this is going to be a huge political blow. It could lead to follow up on sanctions, perhaps, which would affect Nigeria's international stance, to some countries. It's more or less saying that you're not trustworthy. No one should do business with you because your country is not safe. But more or less, I see, the U.S. position as something that it's not very accurate, from my experience, in terms of, labeling it as some kind of a Christian genocide. Because truly enough, in the case of Nigeria, that I've had so much experience in, the killings, by both Boko Haram, the Islamic State of, or the so-called Islamic State of West Africa Province, but even bandits, it's not a case of discrimination. It's not a case of just Christians.
And as a parting shot, David, with the sentencing of Nnamdi Kanu, what are the immediate and medium-term security implications for southeastern Nigeria? Talk to us about the likelihood of increased mobilization, splintering of groups, or localized repression, and recommend concrete steps security forces and mediators should take in the prevention of an immediate escalation.
I think Nnamdi Kanu's sentences to life imprisonment on terrorism charges, etc., is something that should have been planned in terms of what the possible reactions would be. He has been in jail for a very long time. His case has been delayed from time to time, and he wields a lot of control to some of the so-called IPOB independent people of Biafra movements within the southern part of the southeast part of the country. It is not surprising that his sentencing would lead to an immediate uproar, might lead to an increase in abductions again in that part of Nigeria, which would then make things worse. It might lead to increase in attacks, perhaps targeting schools, or very, soft, critical infrastructures, that could potentially, be the next reaction, especially when, you sentence him for life imprisonment, which, gives, indirectly or directly gives no hope of his freedom. But, in terms of a long term, perhaps, there could be some discussions between the government, to consider some clemency. There could be some agreements, with the separatist leader. But we are yet to see if the government is interested in having those kind of negotiations. Even if they are, it is not going to be now. In the medium term, perhaps, the military would show some level of presence, and when I speak of the military, I include the law enforcement, agencies as well, the police, and other security agencies. That we would see some level of high deployment and presence within those areas to act as some kind of a deterrence. But the deed has been done. He's been sentenced to life imprisonment. That is not going to change for now. It is now up to the government to take measures to respond to some of those reactions that may come from some of those groups. But this is not a surprise at all, and it's a normal tactic. It's a normal occurrence when a separatist leader is imprisoned, and he still has some control on ground. Then you'd have some reactions.
Yeah. And David Otto, thanks for your time this evening and for making the time to talk to us about this situation that we know had been recurring in Nigeria of abductions, in particular schoolgirls. For all we know, it has been happening for the past years or so, and hope the situation will be arrested at some point. That was a defense and a counterterrorism expert on Africa, David Otto, who is also the director for the Geneva Center for Africa Security and Strategic Studies, talking to us on the line.
This weekend, South Africa will host the G20 summit at the Nasrec Expo Center near Soweto. And Channel Africa will be right there to bring you live updates, interviews, and real-time insights from the main venue. And so, our regular lineup will be adjusted just a little bit for this weekend to accommodate the G20. On Saturday, the 22nd of November, the Oasis will broadcast for 2 hours. Out and About takes a break for a full look at the G20. After Africa Chart Toppers, our news and current affairs team will bring you special live broadcasts in 5 different languages directly from Nasrec. And normal programming will resume at 8 p.m. Central African Time. And then on Sunday, the 23rd of November, the Oasis will also broadcast for 2 hours. Tech Africa steps aside for our news and current affairs teams to bring you special live broadcasts in 5 different languages. Then, Planting the Seed resumes from 1 p.m. till 2 p.m. Central African Time. Channel Africa, your window to the continent, connecting you to the world in an African perspective. Africa World Hour. Africa World Hour. Unpacking global headlines from an African perspective.
It's just gone 42 minutes to 9. You're listening to Channel Africa. I'm Thabiso Lehoko, and I'm standing in for Tsepiso Makwetla. If you've just tuned in, welcome to it. A growing number of South African women are taking up firearm training as gender-based violence continue to surge across the country. An estimated 15 women are killed every day, a shocking 34% increase from last year. Today, women's groups staged a silent protest calling for a 15-minute halt to all economic activity in what they describe as a stand against the government failure. Activists want a femicide declared a national disaster, warning that without urgent action, the crisis will only deepen. We are now joined on the line by Lynette Oli, the founder of Girls on Fire South Africa, a shooting group for women to train and empower themselves with the use of firearms for self-defense. A very good evening, Lynette. How are you?
Good evening. Hello, Thabiso, and to your viewers. And good evening. I hope everybody's having a good one tonight.
Definitely we are, and very interested to find out on how you plan on help train our women. But let's start here. As we do this interview now, you are armed. Are you?
I'm always armed, and I have been so every day of my life since about 2000, the year 2000. And that's quite a long time. I'm not a young person. I'm not 21 years old. But I've been armed every day of my life since the year 2000.
I know it's not about me, but I myself could panic if I'm confronted by some situations and probably shoot the wrong direction. What kind of training have you prepared for our ladies who could be alike my characteristic?
So we actually encounter this quite often. People very scared, people that's had bad experiences with guns, being frightened about life. So it's not an unusual situation. It's not about the guns. The guns are the last thing that we look at. First, we're actually trying to empower women. So we say to them, we go through a whole situational awareness program where we teach ladies that it's better to be situationally aware and stop the threat before it starts. And if you have a look at statistics, about 70 to 90% of any potential threats are stopped before it actually happens. So in the last resort, and the absolutely last resort, we do train ladies to use firearms as a self-defense tool.
Your program teaches women to use guns for self-defense. I've noted that in what you've just said. How do you then go on to balance the empowerment aspect with the risks associated with firearms, and what safety measures are central to your training?
It's absolutely important. Part of our training is obviously we very much for legal firearm ownerships. We go through the legal aspects about when can you defend yourself and when can't you defend yourself with the firearm. We go through a rigorous process of teaching people that when you do take the action to use a firearm, you need to do it in a legal and a safe manner. And it's not just about your perpetrator. You need to know what's behind your perpetrator. It's all kinds of things. There's one of the rules is that know your target and what's behind it. It's all about safety. We're also very much involved with sport shooting, and a lot of the ladies get involved with sport shooting. And the rigorous safety measures is absolute. You cannot not be safe. It's all about safeties, handling the firearm safely, and not causing harm to anybody.
I've taken something from that. South Africa sees an average of 15 women killed every day, a rise of 34% from last year. That's an alarming statistic. In your view, Absolutely. What are the main drivers behind the surge, and how is it changing the way women protect themselves?
If you think about it, South Africa is actually one of the countries that's the most dangerous place to live, and we're not in an active war. I think if you have a look at the figures, we're worse off than the Ukraine in terms of people that's actually at war. The only way to actually start doing something is to do something. There's a lot of talk, especially today, about activism. I do believe it's important to make people aware of what's going on, but saying it's a national disaster does not change anything on the ground. I try to start with when something happens to a woman in any circumstance. So, for example, it's a home invasion, it's domestic violence, where it's an intimate partner, where there's an attack, a rape attack outside. The only thing that you can be certain about is that the people that will be there is the perpetrator as well as the victim, you. So we like to say, start with trying not to be in that situation. And then if you are in that situation, the great equalizers are a firearm. Defend yourself with everything you have. And that's basically what we teach people. Avoid, but at least start empowering yourself. And it doesn't necessarily, the gun is the last thing that we use. I have a lot of ladies that's been in abusive relationships, and when they actually become trained in firearms, it's a long and rigorous process. They go through proficiency training for competence. It's a very, very long process. They don't just go back and take out the firearm and use it against the abuser. What they do is mostly they feel empowered enough to actually leave that relationship, and that's a win. I want people to start changing the way they think about themselves, not to be victims, but warriors. Go away from that victim mentality and change the way you think and look at yourself. I always say to people, if I look in the mirror, I see a warrior. And I would like other women to look in the mirror and see warriors.
So it's a process that in actual fact equips them to be able to manage or address a myriad of situations confronting them. How has Girls on Fire affected women you train, their families and communities? Can you share the stories or examples where your program has directly prevented harm?
Sorry, what do you mean by have changed things, how people actually look at stuff? Because I don't know what you mean by harm. I can maybe just still tell you the story. One of my ladies, so one of our programs during this year, from next week, we run a program called 16 Days of Action for No Violence Against Women and Children. It's in line with the United Nations 16 Days of Activism for No Violence Against Women and Children. Out of that, we usually have a very big panel with very important panelists that decide on our Christa Swart Fighting Spirit Award, which is handed out during Women's Month at our Top Shot. One of my absolute winners is somebody called Keshna Skuman. Keshna was a winner of our Christa Swart Fighting Spirit Award in 2023. Her story is absolutely horrific. I interviewed her and I walked out there and both me and the cameraman was crying our eyes out. Keshna has moved on. She's one of my directors now. She started something called Ribbons for Justice. She fights for victims every day of her life. Her life has changed. She's no longer, and she doesn't see herself as a victim. She's definitely a warrior. I've never seen anybody that has done so much for the community that she lives in. And every day she's at the police station fighting for victims. And that's what I would like. And that's one of the many stories of people that have changed their lives. I never thought that this was going to happen when I started this program. I think it was one of my top shots. One of the ladies that was also involved in the Christa Swart Fighting Spirit Award came to me and she said to me, Lynette, for the first time, I do not feel like a victim. And that mindset is what I would like to change to start with.
Very inspiring indeed. For women who feel unsafe but are hesitant to use firearms, what advice would you give them in terms of self-protection, situational awareness, and community support networks?
So it's very important. The situational awareness is extremely important. I've just used the figures and I've confirmed it. 70 to 90% of attacks is basically stopped before it happens if you are situationally aware. So part of our program is very much to teach ladies to be aware of what's going on around them, preempt any attack. If they see something is going to go wrong, get out. So that is extremely important. And then we've started to work with other organizations like the Riva Rebecca Steenkamp Foundation, SA Women Fight Back, Women and Tears Foundation. So what happens is a lot of times together we can be stronger. I cannot deal with certain things, with certain traumas. So I've got trauma counselors, etc. So we work very closely together with these other organizations to help the ladies further. But I have an amazing team of women and they're volunteers. We are like a big family. People don't really understand. I've had a French film crew once say to me they've never seen anything like that. On the range, I've got 50 female trained range officers. A lot of them comes out of abusive relationships themselves, and they are there for the other women. We are really like a family and a sisterhood of warriors, and paying it forward to other ladies that's in similar circumstances than themselves.
Lynette, thank you very much for your time this evening. We also saw today a milestone, President Cyril Ramaphosa declaring GBV a national disaster.
Absolutely, that's good. I just hope that we actually do some action, because lip service doesn't mean anything. I would just like to say, there's things that can be changed on the ground, like the DNA backlog, the horrific parole system failings. We need to look at things on the ground. Saying it's a national disaster doesn't mean anything is going to happen on the ground. So I'm waiting for that.
That was Lynette Oli, the founder of Girls on Fire South Africa, a shooting group for women to train and empower themselves with the use of firearms for self-defense. So talking to us there on the line. Still on the line, on a different line. It's the mic.
Of course.
So that time of the evening, Kitty, I'm sure you may want to take up on the firearm training program.
Absolutely. I think it's actually very important that we get our minds wrapped up around that as women. I would like a cute little one though.
Yeah, of course you get
like a
it.
little cute handgun. Yeah, I just think, I think it's a thing that we should actually accustom ourselves to, to protect yourself, just to also feel empowered, and just also to just trust in yourself as well.
Yes.
Also trusting the fact that you got to respect the weapon, as well. Yeah.
Take us through the trust journey. It's the time of the evening. I welcome you, Kitty.
Thank you.
Kitty Petla, right?
Yes, that's correct. Oh, you said it correctly.
Yes. You come in to host African Diaries.
Of course,
between now and
midnight. Yes, yeah.
All right. What's coming up on your show?
Well, it's Friday, my favorite day of the week. And we are going to be doing our Dear Diary entry as per usual. And then we're going to do our usual recap of the shows that happen daily on Channel Africa. And then because it's Friday, we do really, really focus on profiling captains of the industry. And our captain for this evening is a seasoned hip-hop star, rapper, Russ Capitalize is his name. And then we're going to wrap up Africa Diaries with clinical psychologist who's going to be chatting to us about ways to actually for self-care, because it's also nice to just do some introspection and just to check if you're mentally healthy as well. So, and I think it's a nice way to wrap up a Friday. And helping us unpack that is a lovely lady, but I'm just trying to find her name. Oh, my word. But she is a therapist. We see Mzandolo to unpack this for us. So that's what we're going to be checking out and just talking to her and just checking in with the mind, the soul, and the spirit as well.
Very nice topics, Kitty. I resonate with them when I be on the mic. Hardcore. Call me for an opportunity for a cipher.
Yes, I definitely will. Definitely.
That wraps up Africa World Hour tonight. My name is Thabiso Lehoko. Had been standing in for, in actual fact, it seems like we're moving along onto a package. I almost wrapped up the show. Kitty.
That's really for you.
The United States has sought to clarify its position on whether it has had a change of mind regarding the attendance of the G20 summit in Johannesburg. The White House has released a short statement saying its Charles d'Affaires in Pretoria will attend the declaration handover ceremony as a formality. However, the United States says it is not joining the G20 discussions themselves. White House Press Secretary Caroline Levitt had this to say.
The United States is not participating in official talks at the G20 in South Africa. I saw the South African president running his mouth a little bit against the United States and the president of the United States earlier today, and that language is not appreciated by the president or his team. The ambassador or the representative of the embassy in South Africa is simply there to recognize that the United States will be the host of the G20. They are receiving that send-off at the end of the event. They are not there to participate in official talks, despite what the South African president is falsely claiming.
Speaking at the White House, President Trump's press secretary Caroline Levitt has made it clear that the US will not be taking part in the G20 summit. She told reporters that she'd seen, quote, the South African president running his mouth a little bit, and that it's not appreciated by the president and his team. Well, President Trump had previously said that no US officials would be taking part in the G20 summit in South Africa, in the first ever boycott of the multilateral event by any member state, claiming the US absence was justified because white Afrikaners were being killed in South Africa, a false claim that he's made repeatedly since returning to the White House. But on Thursday, President Cyril Ramaphosa said there'd been a change of mind and that Pretoria was in discussions with Washington over participating in one shape, form or the other in the summit. The White House called this fake news. They said that the chargé d'affaires in Pretoria will attend the handover ceremony as a formality, but that the United States is not joining G20 discussions. Now, that was reiterated by the press secretary, who said the US diplomat was not there to participate, as the president is falsely claiming. Washington had also warned Ramaphosa's administration not to attempt the publication of any joint statement given the US's absence. But President Ramaphosa said that talks with Washington were ongoing about more participation than just the diplomatic acceptance, saying they're still discussing how it will manifest. Certainly, sending a US diplomat to the G20 handover ceremony falls far short of full participation in the summit, which is traditionally attended by the US president. Kate Fisher, Washington.
Thanks for listening to Channel Africa and Africa World Hour, respectively, from myself, Thabiso Lehoko, producer Dumelo Zulu, and technical producer Chuchu Maleka, the rest of the Africa World Hour team. Thank you. Thanks for listening. For comments on the show, send us an email. It's at info@channelafrica.org. Goodbye.
Conversations that touch the heart and inspire change. Here on Africa.